Hey everyone, doing some TeaDB here, bringing you another Inbetweenisode. So today I am going to be talking a little bit on Taobao, finding different teas on Taobao, how I go about it. Not that there's one set formula that you need to necessarily follow. And I'm gonna then bring on a tool that I got from a Taobao order, and just talk a little bit about it, what's good about it. Yeah, just basically review the tea. Okay, so first, sort of talking about finding teas on Taobao. So Taobao is basically sort of like a Chinese eBay / Amazon rolled into one. You have a lot of really, some pretty big Pu'erh vendors there that you can definitely buy from. In many ways, Pu'erh is a pretty ideal type of tea to buy from because you have things like wrappers and labels and stuff like that. So there's a certain standardization, whereas if you're buying something like a Wui Oolong or something like that, or something loose, that doesn't have that doesn't have that sort of like standardization, it can be a little bit challenging to do that. Of course, there are some exceptions. That there are like bigger labels like Xidai or Wui Star that might be worth looking out for on Taobao, but for the most part, Pu'erh is great because, like, in general, almost all Pu'erh sort of follows the format of having like a cake where you got a wrapper. It looks like this, and of course you have to worry about certain things like fakes and whatever, but for the most part you can sort of identify what the tea is trying to be. So if it's a 7542, you'll either know it's a real 7542 or it's a fake. You're not going to end up with something white label or whatever. Okay, so that is one reason to look at Pu'erh or Lubao or some other heichas. Another thing that I like, that for me is kind of fun about Taobao, is also just the natural uncertainty to it. It kind of, you can end up with teas that turn out to be better than expected and teas that are worse than expected. So it's buying teas on Taobao, it's just not a guarantee what you're going to get. So it's a good and fun way to just sample a bunch of different teas. The drawback to it is you basically have to jump through a few extra hoops to get the tea, and oftentimes your samples of it are something like an actual cake or a tool, as opposed to a 25-gram sample or something like that. So it's a lot less user-friendly in terms of trying a lot of different teas, but it also offers more in terms of like uncertainty and buying sort of different places. Okay, so how do I end up selecting teas? Well, first off, with the vendor, one vendor that I have purchased tea from, I guess for the last 4 or 5 years, just off and on, is MXT, who is something of a Xiaguan vendor based in Guangzhou. I like that combination of being a Xiaguan and being somewhat humanly stored in southern China. And so it gives the tea a nice little boost. And I'm very rarely buying tea that's really young. So how do I choose what to buy? So in general, I try not to buy the very cheapest tea on Taobao. Part of this is because you just don't want to end up with a ton of really bad cheap tea, so it can pay to buy tea that's a little bit more expensive. And by really cheap, I mean like 5 cents a tool or less, which you can definitely find easily. So in general, I'll shoot for at least 10 cents a gram. And the other thing is I'm also limited by price in a way because I have to buy a whole sample. So I can't just sample a bunch of $200 cakes randomly. Well, I could, but I wouldn't be able to sample a lot of them because it's a $200 cake. So it starts out being fairly expensive. So as a result, I think the teas that I do end up buying on Taobao are probably on the lower rungs of my collection. So I think that's important for me to mentally understand and know, just the fact that I'm usually not shooting for the highest end tea on Taobao. Instead, it's more a way to sample a lot of like mid to lower end tea and have fun and potentially find a couple teas that, are worth buying in larger quantity. So yeah, MXT, regular vendor I buy for. And then how do I find teas? It's honestly not terribly complicated. A lot of it is just, listening to what other people have liked and going out for those teas. So in some sense, it's no different from anything else. Less people in general are sampling Taobao teas, so it might be a little bit more challenging to find what people like. So that's another reason I'm doing this episode, just to talk about a couple teas that I have liked and I've picked up a handful of to enjoy. The actual logistics of Taobao are also interesting. I've written a couple posts in the past that are a few years old, but I think still are relevant, of just how to actually go through the logistics of buying. I also have a video for it. Basically, you need to go through an agent. I use Superbuy, and you basically just copy paste the different teas that you want in. You pay the agent, the teas get shipped to the agent, and then the agent will ship them internationally to you. So it's a bunch of different layers, and you should certainly expect to pay the costs of transactions. So I mean, you'll need to pay international shipping. You'll need to pay certain fees to get it shipped to them. So in general, I think you come out quite a bit ahead in terms of price, just because you can get these actually Chinese retail price. But if you're someone that really, really likes shipping and have everything built in, it's definitely something to know. This is not your Amazon Prime free 2-day shipping. There's quite a bit more variability in terms of shipping and how much it costs and stuff like that. All right. So real quickly, a little bit about this tea. This is a Yincang UR tool, and it actually comes in a set of 4. So I have 4 of these, and I think they all are actually a little different, although they definitely are somewhat similar. Each one of them highlights a different character here. I think this is the R1, so the 4th character here is highlighted, if I'm reading that correctly, which I may or may not be. And I actually just saw this tea mentioned by Nicholas Tang, who is a Pu'erh person that's been around. He's been on TeaChat and stuff like that, and I just saw him mention it, so I thought it would be worth the flyer, the price being about right and stuff, so I took a gamble on it. And I think this is a pretty reasonable buy. I'll talk a little bit more about the tea in the latter half of this episode. But a couple other teas that I have personally enjoyed from MXT and I think are worth trying and seeing if you like are the Jiajis. The 2004 and 2005 hit a good point of quality plus price. Those cost around $10 a tool, so pretty reasonably. I brought on the 2005 Jiaji recently. 2004 is similar, just a little bit more expensive, probably slightly better. And the 2006 Gold Ribbon I like. The 2007 is a little bit strong for me personally. Some people I do know like that. The 2004 is also good, but it's quite a bit more expensive. So I think the 2004 and 2006 are definitely worth trying to see if you like it. 2006 is good enough to fit into sort of my daily rotation, as is something like the 2005 Jiaji. Okay, so let's get into this tea. All right, so for these 4 tools, it costs around $41. I think it was like 260, 270 RMB. So pretty reasonable price. So you're coming out to around 10 cents a gram, probably slightly more as you pay for the logistics fees. Logistics fees, another reason why you want to not necessarily buy the cheapest stuff, because if you're buying a 1 cent a gram tea, for instance, you'll probably end up paying more in logistics fees than you do on the actual tea. So in terms of the relative percentage of the cost, you want to buy stuff that's not the absolute cheapest available. And I also wanted to quickly mention this other 2014 cake I got is another good example of how teas end up on my radar. This one ended up on my radar because one of my friends, Toby, said that it's sort of like a 7542 like cake. 2014 cake, so that's definitely one of the absolute youngest I will go, but it's been stored in Guangzhou, so it's probably just starting to get those characteristics. And I kind of feel similarly about both of these teas. They're both decent, good for the price. Not sure if I'm going to buy more. Still kind of up in the air. Still got to make those decisions. And part of that is just because there's only so many teas you need to really buy more of. Anyways, I have steep number 3 here. I'm going to take a quick smell of this as well. So very little smoke in this. A little bit of a fruity, resinous nose, fruity, woody, resinous. Cheers. Good strength, definitely some upfront bitterness, but it's managed with a lot of sort of that piney resinous tone that I personally really like in Xiaguan. You can also see that this is pretty firmly semi-aged, brewing up this sort of like, for me this is sort of an orangish red. And I am going to brew steep number 5 here. So pretty good strength on that. That lingering sort of bitterness is sticking and just sort of slowly converting to sweetness. Alright, so steep number 5. Find the longevity of this is probably about average for a Pu'erh, probably above average for a Xiaguan. Pretty solid body, good strength to this. Definitely some room to improve as far as age, but also pretty drinkable now, I'd say. In terms of characteristic flavors of Xiaguan, that is always noted smoke. Don't detect a lot of that here. It is possible it was lightly smoky before, but I don't really taste that here either. More in those woody tones. Moving more towards just a straight fruit wood aroma. Yeah, and you can see even with those pretty short steep times. One other thing to note about these tools is they tend to be pretty tippy, which means they're pretty front loaded as far as the sessions go. For me, that means I tend to want to brew them pretty quickly, and you probably don't get quite as much longevity out of it. Can also be pretty darn caffeinated brews. Cheers. So it's just a really nice combination of strength, some really mild sweetness. I think my previous session with this was a little bit sweeter, maybe also the first couple steeps I had earlier this morning. And that might just be because those first steeps is still sort of opening up. But I also like it when it's sort of going at full blast, as it is right now. Definitely getting a nice little blast of caffeine from this. A good tea to just sort of like drink, enjoy, and then go to work. So it has like nice burly tones. It has that sort of like that really well blended resinous texture to it. So it just feels a little more substantial while you're drinking it rather than sort of like empty or whatever in the middle. And yeah, I'd say compared to something like the Jiaji and the Gold Ribbon, it's probably a pretty similar caliber. I'd say it, while they're in the same genre of tea, I'd say they're probably kind of like cousins of each other, not exactly the same, but do have some underlying characteristics that are quite similar, but are definitely worth trying. I mean, I don't think I would I think if you swapped this tool with one of the Jiaji tools or a Gold Ribbon tool behind me, I think I would probably I think they're distinct enough that you would pick that out. So yeah, I definitely recommend this tea, especially if you're someone that's into Xiaguan of this age range. And I think looking at these teas, it's like 15 years old, about to be 16 years old. I'm filming this at the very end of 2020, and the price is very, very reasonable. So definitely one worth checking out. So I think one very legitimate strategy for buying or just sampling a bunch of different things from MXT would be just to buy a bunch of tools that are in this like 13 to 15 year old age range and see what you like. One nice thing about tools is they are smaller, so you can sample a little more widely without being as committed to larger cakes. And yeah, I mean, I think this tea, while it doesn't do anything outstandingly, is just overall really, really solid. So I'm going to give it a 6.0 rating. I gave the Jiaji, and the 2005 Jiaji and the 2006 Gold Ribbons, I believe, 5.9 ratings. So kind of in the same category, I mean, just slightly higher. I could see that varying depending on the day. So this steep is just slightly lighter, maybe just slight creaminess to it as well, which I'm enjoying. If you are a lover of factory tea, especially a lover of sort of semi-aged factory tea that has a good combination of sort of the mellowness that age brings around, and strength that you're going to get from factory tea, I definitely recommend this one. So thank you all for tuning in. If you bought from Taobao, post below. Let us know how it's gone. Let us know if you have any picks. I think a lot of I think people can provide a lot of value to each other by just talking about their experiences with Taobao, especially because it's a method of purchasing that is not necessarily as straightforward as just going to a vendor and buying and paying their shipping costs. So I think it's valuable to share experiences and stuff like that. So I wanted to bring this on. Hope to bring on a couple different teas. Maybe I'll bring on that 2014 cake too at some point. Not sure. But thank you all for tuning in. Let me know how you like this episode. I will see you all next time. Cheers.